stripping the thin, almost translucent veil between that of fact and fiction, revealing mysteries of the past, folklore passed down from father to son, unsolved murders, and things that go bump in the night. You've entered Deceptive Reality.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Deceptive Reality Podcast, special two-parter episode. My name is Nick, and with me, as always, is the unadulterated Bert.
Unadulterated. Listen,
Yeah,
it fits.
you're undiluted. You're 100% pure Bert, not from concentrate.
That is correct. 100%. Listen, no one can tell me otherwise.
That's right. See, we're on a mission. We're not only going to tell you about the paranormal, the mysterious, unsolved mysteries, we're also increasing your vocabulary.
Exactly. Nick has some bangers. Let me tell you, I feel like I learn at least a word a week at this point, which is amazing.
That's minimum. Got to be minimum.
I did find out while editing a video the other day, though, you completely lied in a podcast, Nick.
Oh, what did I say?
We was on the Crop Circle podcast, which, if you remember, was two before Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
You gave me an easy word, which I can't remember. And you said, since this is your religious holiday of Halloween, you was going to give me easy words the rest of the month, which was a lie, Nick.
Oh, they're all easy. You have access to the internet.
Oh, man. Well, hopefully you guys are ready to figure out part 2. Last week, we promised you that we was going to let you know what happened to Bentrichet, Omm Sety, a.k.a. Dorothy Eady. And we're not going to disappoint. I think the rest of this story, Nick and I already know it. We've already recorded it. I think you're going to find it very interesting how these stories weave together, which we said they weave, but how do they weave together?
It is wild, and I feel so bad for you suckers having to wait a whole week to get to this. I feel so bad.
Man,
I don't.
You know what we should do eventually? What we should do eventually is combine part 1 and part 2 together and have like a really long one for each one of these. I've never thought of doing that, but that might not be a bad idea.
Let's put them all together every episode.
Oh, man.
At the end of the year.
Have like a super marathon.
Yeah,
stream them all day long.
Giant video on YouTube. It's up there for like 2 weeks and then it disappears.
Think about it. We could do like TV shows, though. We could stream it all day long once a year.
Oh, yeah. Just put it on Twitch.
Yeah.
People do that stuff.
Or YouTube. You could put on YouTube also. Put it on as an all-day stream.
Yeah, we could do that.
We should totally do that, Nick. We should piece all of them. Okay, listen, I'm thinking of that. We're going to do that one of these days. Maybe New Year's Eve. We could do it for New Year's Eve, Nick.
Oh, that'd be cool.
That'd be cool. 24-hour stream of just our episodes.
Yeah, breaking the new year.
You got to figure each one of these is at least an hour. We're on episode 18 right now. That's 18 hours right there. Plus, there's some of these as 2-parters. It's like, an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes. We did one the other day. There's an hour and 59 minutes.
Yeah. I love these 2-parters, by the way. I know some people.
Yeah.
I love them.
Not so much. Well, obviously, we know you've been gone for a week. You probably need to know what happened. So let's do a little refresher. Let's go.
Medical professionals arrive on the scene and their verdict is chilling. Dorothy has passed away. Just as loss began to flood the room, Dorothy stirs. Her eyes flicker open and she takes a shaky breath. She comes back to life, but forever changed. The doctors are baffled. They had just declared her gone, if only for a few heart-stopping moments. What they don't yet realize is that these brief moments were a threshold, a doorway to something that defies understanding. When she wakes up, something within her has forever shifted.
I got caught up in that narration, I gotta tell you.
That's the goal, Nick. That's what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I don't know yet if I know this one.
This story is so deep and so profound, and it's always intrigued me because of the dynamic of this story. Since Nick doesn't know what is so special about Dorothy Eady, it's going to start explaining that in the second segment.
After her curious waking, Dorothy becomes a clearly different child. Her parents notice it first in her drawings. Gone are the usual childish scribbles of animals and stick figures. Now she sketches pyramids and sphinxes, complete with intricate hieroglyphics. Mind you, she's just 4 years old.
Oh, this is blowing my mind already. This is fascinating.
Do you know this story?
I don't know this story. I've never heard a peep about it.
Oh, man, Nick, this is the most exciting thing I've heard. This is a story of reincarnation.
Okay.
But it's probably the best story of reincarnation I know.
One day, Dorothy's parents decide to take her on a trip to the British Museum. They hope it might give their curious daughter a chance to see and learn about Egypt, thinking it might satisfy her endless fascination. Little did they know this trip would only fan the flames of her passion. As they walk through the grand rooms of the museum, Dorothy's excitement is palpable. Her eyes dart from one exhibit to the next, drinking in the rich tapestry of Egyptian history. But then, something extraordinary happens. They enter the New Kingdom Temple exhibits room, and Dorothy is drawn to a particular photograph. It's an image of the Temple of Seti I. "There, that's my home," she exclaims, her voice filled with emotion. But her face soon turns to confusion. Where are the trees? Where are the gardens? She wonders out loud. To her parents' astonishment, she seems to recognize the place as if she had lived there.
A key moment, which I'm not going to give you. If you can't figure it out, you're going to have to go to the next segment after this. But I think this next segment really kind of broadens the entire story. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Let's go!
As the tapestry of Dorothy's life continued to unravel, her ties to Egypt wove ever tighter patterns. At the age of 27, London's vibrant chaos enveloped her once again. Yet within its teeming streets, she found her calling as Egypt's mouthpiece. Joining the editorial team of an Egyptian public relations magazine, Dorothy meshed her livelihood with her deep-seated passion for the ancient land. Within these pages, she rose beyond the role of an enthusiast or academic. She emerged as an intense advocate. Her words and illustrations weren't just informative, they were a clarion call for Egypt's independence. Her style spread passion, her mocking cartoons cleverly critiquing the political scene, all underscoring her unwavering solidarity with Egypt's struggle for independence. Dorothy's destiny seemed intimately linked to this ancient culture. In an unexpected twist, she met Imam Abdul Megwid, an Egyptian student. Their shared love with Egypt's legacy sparked an immediate kinship. They found relief and excitement in each other's perspectives, weaving a friendship enriched by the love of their mutual heritage. Yet, as all things must, circumstances shifted. Imam's inevitable return to Egypt could not untangle the bond they had formed. Their correspondence bridged the physical divide, their letters a lifeline of connection, affirming the deepening of their relationship despite the miles. With the arrival of the 1930s, Dorothy stood on the cliff of a life-altering decision. Imam's letters, once a source of shared insights, now held a proposition of lifelong partnership. Compelled by a force that felt like the pull of destiny, she accepted. In 1931, Dorothy bid farewell to London, setting sail to join her heart's counterpart in the ancient land of their dreams. Stepping onto Egyptian soil, Dorothy was overcome by a mysterious sense of belonging. Kneeling, she kissed the earth, a symbolic homecoming that transcended time. She whispered to the winds of her return, not as a visitor, but as one reclaiming her place in a story that had been written long before. The streets of Cairo embraced her with equal dedication. Imam's family, moved by her devotion to their shared history, bestowed upon her the name Bobo, recognizing her soul's song. The birth of their son Seti affirmed her bond to the past, and with it, her new identity crystallized. Omm Sety, the mother of Seti.
Well, that was cyclical almost. Interesting. Interesting how that worked.
Kind of funny how that works. So in this case, it's interesting from the perspective that she spent her entire life up to this point, 27 years, in London. Even through World War I, they moved to Sussex.
Yeah.
So up to this age, she basically becomes an advocate for Egypt. Now, she has cartoons that come out basically talking about Egypt's independence.
Yeah.
And she runs with it. And in doing so, that brings the attention of our man, Abdel. I'm going to butcher this last name. Meguid. Meguid. Abdul Meguid. So they end up meeting because he's also an advocate for it.
Okay.
But it's super interesting because she meets him. They start having these intriguing conversations. Next thing you know, he has to go back.
Right.
They're still corresponding. Now think about it. This isn't nowadays. There's no email.
No.
There's no, hey, let me call or text you.
This is pen to paper.
Pen to paper. And the whole time he's like, come be with me. I love you. I want to start a family with you. But think about it. He's Egyptian.
Mm-hmm.
She's from London. That's a hard, because think about Egyptian lifestyle. How does Egyptians typically live in that time frame?
It would be
most of the marriages, correct. Most of the marriages, a lot of them was prearranged.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them. So he goes, meets her, and then he comes back. Think about that conversation with his parents. First off, Mom, Dad, I found this woman. I'm in love with her.
Mm-hmm.
She's an advocate for Egypt. Really? Is she Egyptian, son?
Maybe they didn't ask. Maybe they just assumed.
I mean, I would have probably assumed.
Like back in those days, like how many people were super duper into Egypt? Probably
that's what I'm saying.
Egyptians.
Which, if you think about it, he was there. Yeah, he was there. Who's to think that another female Egyptian wouldn't be there?
Yeah, I mean, that happens all the time. People go to other countries and meet people from their same country.
I'm super curious if they did know ahead of time. Like, what if she just got off the plane and they're like, where's your girl at? And he goes, that's her. She's white as all get out.
Well, I mean, I feel like they would have asked. But who knows? Maybe he was deceptive about it. Maybe he's like, yeah, she's like an Egyptian.
She's got 2 legs, 2 arms. Pretty sure she had 2 eyes.
Well, actually, considering the story we're telling right now, they're like, son, is she Egyptian? She was an Egyptian.
You know what? I didn't even think about this. What if he went home and said, yeah, I fell in love with this lady. Her name is Omm Sety. Didn't even say Dorothy Eady.
Yeah. So they're like, I wonder if when she was an adult, she was giving out that name.
I don't know.
Saying,
that's what
Dorothy.
Dang it. I screwed this up because I definitely should have looked that up. I didn't look that up. I have no clue.
I have no clue. If it would say.
Because she said she did like to be referred to as Omm Sety.
Yeah. And when she got an adult, she could definitely say that if she wanted to.
Think about it. She's 27 years old. How ticked off was his parents?
Okay, let's rewind. Okay, so you've met this girl. What's her name? Omm Sety. Oh, and they're just like, yeah, that's definitely not a
that's a strong
white
name.
Girl's name. It's not a white girl's name.
That's a strong name.
I guess I don't have to ask if it's an Egyptian girl.
Yeah. There's no
Or
pictures.
Right. There's no pictures probably.
Yeah, he didn't come home with his picture.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're probably like, oh yeah, okay, we'll just assume she's an Egyptian. And you know what? Part of her soul is Egyptian, so they're not entirely wrong.
No.
And it worked out. They're super happy with her. They gave her a title, which I can't recall it off the top of my head.
Think about it, though. Think about it. They get off they go to the airport, and it's like Egypt the whole time. They're like, is that her? No. Is that
You'll
her?
know her when you see her.
I guess the last one is some Caucasian girl. She's like,
yeah.
Where else? She was the last one. No, that's her. What? Her name's Omm Sety.
we should have asked more questions.
Oh man, dang. we should redo this entire thing, Nick. God dang. That would have made for great narration.
Oh, I know.
But
we could do the voices.
I know. That would have been awesome. What I find interesting, though, she gets there, right? She's done everything else. She's gotten there now. Yeah. I fast forwarded it a lot through this process because nothing really built the story. So that's why we went from they met to, hey, I'm here to stay. Knock, knock, knock.
Yeah.
She gets there, and the first thing she does is gets off the plane and kisses the ground.
I was just imagining like if you really felt that way, the feeling of relief you'd feel getting back there.
Correct. And the other thing that I look at is, let's say, right, let's take everything and pull it back into context, like what you said. She believes she is this person. 100%, couldn't sell her either direction. She's Omm Sety. She gets there, and now she feels like she's back home. Like when she was a kid, I want to go home.
Yeah.
So from the age of 3 or 4 until 27 years old, she feels like she's never been home.
It almost feels like this was fated, like this was destined to happen from back then. Everything fell into alignment, if you think about it.
Correct.
Oh, is this something that you're going to wow me with after?
We're definitely, there's going to be a part where you're going to be like, and then there's going to be a part where you're like, wow, that's crazy. We're coming up on the wow part. I'm going to let you down a little bit here in a little bit in the next segment.
Oh no. After all this, I can't be let down.
Well,
I'm gonna skip this segment and
the way I look at this though, and the way I think about this, like when we think about everything that's happened, she's back home now. So she feels like her purpose is now, like, think about it. To her, she knew her past as 3, but she feels like she's not been home. She gets there.
Right.
The emotion alone has to just be like, wow, this would be like a homecoming for her.
Yeah. Like I was imagining a huge sigh of relief. Like, finally, I've made it to where I'm supposed to be.
Correct. Now, the worst part is when you get to that place, the worst thing that could possibly happen is not having acceptance. But in her case, Abdul, whatever his name is, Abdel, I think. Abdel, his parents accepted of her.
Loved her, apparently.
Loved her. And I think the name that they gave her was interpreted as in Mother of Seti, I think is what that means. I think it's like Bobble or Bobble.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. But what's more important, because I feel like to a degree, as a parent, when your child brings someone home, regardless of if it's someone you're thrilled with or not, you got to be like, okay, cool. Yeah, she's great. She's great. Neighbors and communities don't have to do that.
No.
But it made very specific indication the local community also loved her too. So the fact that there was, she did. But think about it. She's been an advocate for each. Plus, on top of that, she's probably doing things at her level that's above the people that live there, right?
Right.
It would be like someone coming to Canada and you live in Canada and then they give you something from Canada and you're like, I have no clue what you're talking about. Like you would be impressed by that.
Totally
you know
happen.
What I mean? But that's what I'm saying. Like you'd be totally impressed. You'd be like, how does this person know so much? But listen, it's like they're a part of us. Like if they know this, that's crazy.
Yeah, they're just like a regular Canadian. But I think too, I just thought she must be speaking Egyptian.
I'm sure. I mean, think about it. She's reading and writing hieroglyphics.
Right.
She has to be speaking the language. She has to. In fact, she was singing hymns at 12 years old that hasn't been around for how long? So clearly she was probably very well versed.
I wonder if she had to learn it or if it was part of the package when she came to, because she was singing those hymns. She wasn't taught them. So that's a knowledge that came back from her past life. Does she know the language? Was it an outdated dialect, like you mentioned earlier?
The only thing that
I'd like to know.
Well, the only thing that they've ever discussed is she had to learn hieroglyphics, but it's as though she knew enough of it to where it was easy for her to pick up.
Yeah.
So it'd be like someone that was like musically talented, but may not know specifically how to produce music, but they know enough to where when they go to produce, it's like, I understand this, and this. So I can know differently than like, honestly, I think anyone that goes into film work should start as a photographer.
Right.
And everyone goes, why is that? They're completely different. They're really not. As a photographer, you have to learn how to frame. The vast majority of film is framing. The vast majority. The difference is with film, you have more opportunities to get it right than with photos. If you get it right with a photo, if you take one photo and walk away, you're done. That's the only frame of reference you have. So that's the way that I look at cases like this.
Here's how
she had enough.
Mm-hmm. She worked in the temple. She spoke Egyptian.
Mm-hmm.
Might not have learned hieroglyphics at that time in a position.
Yeah.
You've worked for the church.
Mm-hmm.
You speak the same language that they're commonly speaking in the church.
Yeah.
How's your Greek writing?
Correct. Actually, like upstairs, prime example. Upstairs, I have an interlinear Bible.
Right.
If it wasn't for the captions, I'd have no clue what it says. And it's from the original Dead Sea Scrolls. So it's like, it's in Latin, Hebrew, Arabic. So without those, I would never know. I couldn't tell you to this day if what they're saying is true. Like, I couldn't tell you.
I bet you most of Egypt couldn't read hieroglyphics in that day.
Or think about it. It could be a case even where, think about it, right? Like what was that? It was crop circles. So the episode that would have came out 2 weeks ago, based on our time frame right here, or 3 weeks ago. Sorry, 3 weeks ago, because this is two-parter. 3 weeks ago, we did the crop circles. Remember the Hertfordshire Journal in the Old English?
Yeah.
We could read it, not perfectly, but like there's some words there that we had no clue what it was. It's probably a similar case to this if you think about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, here's another thing to consider. I learned stuff when I was a kid that decades later, I can't really remember it because that's a long time to remember something. She's trying to remember something from 3,000 years ago.
That's a long time.
He was like, well, I've forgotten all of this. I haven't done it in 3,000 years.
Now, I did find one thing at the end very interesting about this, Nick.
Okay.
And you might be able to answer this, maybe not. When a woman names their child, what's the biggest thing that they can do? The most important thing that they could do?
When they name their child, what's the most important thing that they could do?
Not for them per se, but for someone else.
Name the child after them.
The biggest thing they can do is typically, if there's someone important in their life,
Right.
they'll typically adapt some portion of the name of the child to pay homage to someone else.
Right.
Her son was named Seti.
I did find that very interesting. You probably saw my reaction. But then afterwards I was thinking, so I must have the order of these things wrong. They didn't give her the title of Mother of Seti and then she had a baby. They must have gave her that title after she had the baby. Otherwise, they kind of forced her hand.
My guess is one was like a nickname, so to speak.
Right.
So like Omm Sety is the name that she had as a child. That's why she, technically there's 4 names. This is where this gets a little confusing. Okay. You got Dorothy Eady, Omm Sety. Those are all before anything's happened, right?
Right.
The Boba, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That basically means Mother of Seti. So it'd be like a nickname, right?
Right. But she would have had the kid before she got that nickname, right?
I would believe so.
Because otherwise
she would have had the kid first.
Oh, everyone's calling you Mother of Seti. What's your kid's name? Got to be Seti, right? And she's like, nope, it's Robert.
Yeah,
well, that
exactly.
Makes sense.
Exactly. Well, and I think that's what they did. They gave her that nickname after Seti was born. Right. Now, the fourth name, the fourth name, we're going to figure out in the next segment why the fourth name holds importance.
Is this related to that person who sort of entered the story briefly earlier?
Yeah, we're about to entangle that name.
And you're also saying that this next segment's going to let me down somehow.
I don't think you're going to be too hurt by it.
Okay.
But I think that
I might be.
I think that you'll be fine with it. I think I added it to the narration. If not, we're still going to talk about it. But it's, I think you're going to be like, you're going to hear it and you're going to be like, oh, but then after that, you're going to be like, well, this is cool new info. So it's like,
all right. It's just
it's a 2 for 1. It's a little dip.
Okay.
You know, things happen.
The worst thing that could possibly happen is that the story ends with her saying, oh, you remember all that Egypt stuff? Just kidding.
Just kidding. Could you imagine?
That's not going to happen, though.
No.
I'd flip this desk with all the expensive stuff on it. That's how mad I'd be.
I only did that for crop circles when I brought up our boys. our buddies.
Yeah.
That made all the crop circles.
By the way, those guys are dummies.
Nick's going to say that every
Still
podcast.
Don't like them. I feel about them the same way I feel about owls at this point. So
yeah, stupid owls, man. I hate every single time I hear owls. It's like, that is so stupid.
Yeah. I saw an owl
the other
day, I hit it with a stick. Kidding. That's illegal. I didn't do that.
Yeah, that's illegal, Nick. Don't be doing stuff like that. We're a reputable podcast company.
Let's move on right quick.
Let's go.
In the flourishing twilight of her Egyptian odyssey, Dorothy Eady, now Omm Sety, found her 2 worlds entwined. At night, Hor-Ra visited, revealing stories of Bentrishit, a priestess of ancient times whose name sang of joy. His supernatural mentorship, spanning a year, entrusted her with a legacy penned in hieroglyphs. Bentrishit's tale emerged from the stillness of night, woven by Dorothy's faithful hand. It was a narrative resurrecting a life once lived, etched in the sands of antiquity. A soldier's daughter, orphaned and surrendered to the temple, grew within sacred walls, her path unwinding before her in the flickering candlelight of Kamel Sultan. Nightly, as Dorothy inked the unfolding saga, Bentrishit's childhood in the temple echoed through the centuries, a tone of ritual and kinship. In adolescence, the pivot of destiny awaited her decision. The temple or the world? Her young heart chose dedication. Through Hor-Ra's words, the temple's pulse, vibrant with divine chants and incense, lived again. Bentrishit, now a vessel of the gods, blossomed in duty and in the simple joys by the temple pond. Her story, a scroll of choices, each a stepping stone back to Dorothy. The temple rites, under Bentrishit's tender care, were a tapestry of cosmic threads, each a communion with the heavens. The yearly mysteries were her soul's odyssey, where the divine veil wavered thin. Then, Pharaoh Seti I's arrival, destinies entwined, a forbidden union that transcended time. Their love, a forbidden feast of knowledge, bore the fruit of consequence. Scandal loomed, the high priest's wrath was unyielding. Facing dishonor, Bentrishit's final act was one of surrender to the Nile's depth, a spirit not extinguished but prepared to journey through time's current once again.
I don't know what the F happened here. I'm so confused. All right, so where do I start?
Do you want me to break it down?
Yeah,
that was a lot.
There was a lot of words I didn't even understand, and there's a lot going on.
This is why I said let me bring my notes out. Do you see?
Yeah, I'm intrigued. I just am. I think I had a stroke. I don't know what's going on.
It's a lot. This one's a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Break it down for me, please.
So, Dorothy, aka Omm Sety,
yeah,
aka Babel.
Mm-hmm.
She starts having these, at this point, almost divine dreams.
About Bentro shit. Bentrish.
Yes.
Okay.
Bentrish. Yeah.
Bentrish.
Yep. But it's coming from Horus. And you know Horus.
Oh. The narration. I think was saying it funny. Yeah.
Horus. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, that's one mystery cleared up.
Yeah. So Horus was coming. Yeah. Which for anyone that doesn't know, Horus. Yes. Horus is basically the equivalent of the all-seeing eye. In fact, her symbol is an eye. It's kind of an eye. Kind of.
The eye of Horus.
Yeah. So Horus is coming to her in the middle of the night and basically breaking down this story. So now from the other narrative, remember how I said the story of Moses is very similar, right? So Bentrishit's life started as a baby for a soldier in the Egyptian army.
Okay. Yeah, I followed that part.
He was so poor, he could not take care of his daughter anymore.
Surrendered her to the temple.
Yes. Now, when that happened back then, typically you have two choices once you get to an age, and I'm not sure what that age is. I tried to look it up and I couldn't find it. But back then, she had two choices, and one of the choices was you go and you live as an everyday, whatever the equivalent of a person would be. Option 2 is now you're basically property of the Egyptians.
So like dedication to the church.
100% dedication. You're a virgin for life. You're basically like a high-level servant is what I would put it. But you also have some power in that. In the story, Seti comes along. He's perusing. And he goes, who's the hot chick? Right? And then he did a quagmire. Giggity, giggity. That's giggity, giggity. You know?
That should have been in there. I think that would have helped illustrate.
If I thought for sure old Don could go giggity, giggity, I definitely would have put it in there. Yeah. So, long story short, they do the boom chicka wow wow.
Right.
Which, not good. Because that wasn't allowed for her at all.
She's not supposed to do that. She promised she wouldn't.
Yes. She was supposed to be a virgin for life.
That's right.
That was part of her That was part of her agreement.
Now, Seti was a pharaoh, Seti the first, right?
He was a pharaoh, yeah.
Now, weren't they divinity?
Yes.
So, like, if God himself come down, he could order her to do anything, though. So that makes it okay.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Good. She's safe. It's fine.
Somewhat. But as a pharaoh, you're not allowed to have a child with anyone that's not within your Egyptian line.
Right.
Or like your hierarchy. A lot of times, listen, it is what it is. I think we can all agree.
Keeping it in the family.
They were keeping it in the family, right? It was a good old case of the Whitakers. For anyone that knows that reference. But they was keeping it in the family. You know who I'm talking about, right? The Whitakers?
I don't.
Oh, man. Do me a favor.
It's probably like our Goalers.
Could be. There was a documentary that came out called The Whitakers.
I'll look up Whitakers after, and you look up Goalers.
Write it down right now.
It's going to be the same story with different names, I'm sure of it.
Probably. So, Seti the First does the bone chicka bow wow with Bentrichet.
Mm-hmm.
And it alluded to, but I couldn't find definitive proof. But it alluded to, she came back and was like, hey, I haven't had that time of the month for a little bit. And they're like, yeah, that doesn't happen. So basically they're like, well, you're cut off. Like there's no use for you anymore. And basically kind of get out. But what she decided to do was to drown herself in the Nile River.
Okay. So that part, that's kind of what I thought happened.
Mm-hmm.
But then I thought, well, maybe this is connected to Seti. And maybe because you mentioned the biblical story there, that it's kind of like that. I was like, did she put that baby in a basket and drop it in the water? Is that what happened? But I guess not.
And no, what I meant by that is like Moses was put in the water and then he wasn't supposed to be a pharaoh.
Right.
When you look at Bentrichet, she should have been the child of a soldier and would have never gotten that close to even being within the grasp of Seti the First.
Right.
But because the soldier gave her up, she was put in a position that she should technically, if it would have followed suit like it should have, Bentrichet would have never been anywhere near Seti the First.
Right.
She never would have had an opportunity.
So did she not have the baby, or did she have the baby then drown?
She killed herself
before having it. Okay, well, there goes my theory then.
Well, there's two active theories on this.
Okay.
And it's all from Hurrah. Or at least what I've seen. Theory one is, and this is where it kind of ties in.
Okay.
It's thought that the baby that was in Bentrichet was the soul that ended up in Dorothy Eady / Omm Sety / Babel.
Okay.
Option two is it's the soul of Bentrichet that was Omm Sety. In which the name Bentrichet basically means, I think it's like song or birds of song or song of birds or something like that. Right. Something to do with music.
So the two options are, again, it's her soul that actually went into Dorothy, or the soul of the baby.
That's the thought.
Okay.
Or theory, should I say.
I wonder if Omm Sety means anything. Is that like child
it does.
of Seti?
No. So Omm Sety, I'm going to look this up. Okay. So every single name, with the exception of Dorothy Eady, because that's not a cool name. they all mean something. Let me jump off my page here on my internet. For anyone that doesn't know, I was looking up ghost voice boxes last night. Don't ask why.
Seems related.
Yeah, it seems completely related. Don't ask questions. What does Omm Sety mean? I had this, but I don't have it in the notes. I don't know why. Oh yeah, we can't talk
the
about
whole
that
time.
part.
It must mean something.
Yeah, every single thing meant something. You know what? It's not. I'm gonna have to look this up on the old Chat GPT because that didn't tell me either, which is surprising. I thought Wikipedia would know by default. I was clearly wrong on that. Wikipedia let me down.
Yeah, I guess you got to add it in there then.
Yeah, what are you doing with your life? I don't actually know how to do that.
This is a sourceless claim, but I heard there was like one guy who does most of Wikipedia. It's just some random guy who edits all kinds of articles. He's not even related to the people who made it.
A long time ago, somehow, and I'm not going to go into too many specifics on this.
Right.
It was basically, long story short, an article that came out about me and something that I was doing. Mm-hmm. And I freaked out because I'm like, how do I get rid of this? So I had to put a request in to Wikipedia to have it removed. But for a long time, if you looked up my name, that would pop up first.
Oh.
Well, Nick, I didn't know this. This is not Omm in Arabic means mother.
Oh.
And then Seti, which was the name of her son. So Omm Sety. That's weird.
Well, okay, this is a weird circle then. This now changes some things.
Yeah, I thought that Omm Sety meant something completely different. Man, even I'm learning something in my own podcast. That's exciting.
Yeah, that's this sort of lends a whole other dimension to the story, in my opinion.
Well, this is interesting because I don't know which one's right and which one's wrong. Mm-hmm. Whether it's Chat GPT that's wrong or whether it's the research pages that I did. According to this, Dorothy Eady, later on as Omm Sety, adopted her name after moving to Egypt. The exact timing in which she started to be called Omm Sety is not precisely documented, but it likely began after the birth of her son Seti in Egypt. This would have been sometime after she moved to Egypt with her husband. The Omm Sety follows the Arabic. That's weird because where I did most of my research said that she started requesting as a kid to be called Omm Sety. So that's very interesting. I don't know which one's right or wrong, and sometimes ChatGPT is wrong.
It could be both. She could have been requesting that, and then as her adult life, she started to go by Dorothy again, and then they actually nicknamed her Omm Sety later on in Egypt.
I don't know. Very interesting, though.
We'll have to revisit that maybe. But I guess this makes it more clear that she probably was Bentroshet. So that sort of ties that in a little better for me, I think, because Bentroshet would have ended up being the mother of Seti II. Omm Sety.
Would have, yeah.
Would have. So I think that sort of ties it all together for me anyway.
It's very interesting to me when you look at the entire narrative and the entire story that even if you forget the name part of it, right? So Hora comes in And she basically says, this is in some capacity your life. And think about it. You're trying to understand where you're coming up with all this stuff. First, you identify it as a nightmare. So every night you're thinking you're having these nightmares. For a while, when she was younger, she was having these quote unquote nightmares and sleepwalking, and they put you in an asylum.
Right.
Or I believe back then they called them what? Sanctuaries?
Sanitariums.
Sanitariums, that's it, yeah.
Yeah.
Sanctuary is something completely different.
Spent my time in a good share of No, just kidding. Probably should have, but didn't.
But it kind of ties it together from the standpoint for me, because she learned hieroglyphics at a young age, but in the story of her life was also wrote in the hieroglyphics in her dreams. Which is very interesting. Yes. So she went from
I was just going to say extra interesting. If she can remember hieroglyphics from her dreams, that's another bit of evidence that something's unusual, because my understanding is it's impossible to read in your dreams under normal circumstances.
I don't know. I don't dream very often, or I don't remember my dreams very often anyway, but I can't ever remember reading.
The part of your brain that's active during sleep is not any part that's involved with understanding language and reading. That's
probably a good indication that's not going to work then.
Yeah. So if she remembered it, it could be, and maybe I'm being too generous here, it could be something more than a dream.
Could be. Very well could be.
For me, that's going to be evidence, because I'm into this.
I mean, again, it's very interesting. And think about it. You're dreaming all this stuff, and then you're like, this is my past.
Yeah.
Like this is either this is how I lived. I was a priestess, is what she ended up being. But think about the amount of nerve it would take to just say, I don't want to live in this world anymore, and just go into the Nile and just taking that quote unquote plunge too soon.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a random thought, but I wonder if the Nile is like warm.
I don't know, especially during this time frame, because it was a completely different lushness back then.
Back in Egyptian times, and I guess like Roman and Greek times, though, and in a lot of cultures back then, taking your own life was not really looked upon as harshly as it is now.
It was, in some degrees, it was considered almost an honor.
Yeah. Or a way of saving face sometimes, or showing even respect to others in some cases. So plus, if they were absolutely certain what their afterlife was, I guess it wouldn't matter as much to them.
That's true. I mean, I hate to say this, and I'm a horrible person for saying this. Think about if you're Seti the first and you're like, my cousin looking mighty good today. Then you look over and you go, well, who's that tall drink of water, priestess woman right there?
That's not my cousin at all. Even better.
That ain't my sister. What?
Right. I can definitely see that being more attractive.
Oh, man.
Because they've probably been doing that for a while at that point. They probably weren't right attractive at all.
For sure. And it looks like I left part of the story out of the narration because like I said, I had to take some things out of the narration. I couldn't remember what I took out.
Right.
Him and her, Omm Sety, aka Dorothy Eady, aka Bobble, aka I feel like who's that rapper that has all the AKA? Diddy?
Yeah.
Puffy? That's what this feels like. Her and her husband didn't make it. They ended up getting divorced.
Oh no.
Yeah.
It definitely didn't say that.
No, I took that part out because I'm like, cool part of the story, but doesn't doesn't drive it anymore. But it does.
Sad to hear that.
I know. Sad relation right there.
Yeah, that's the only part that really let me down.
I thought the death of her would have been a letdown.
It kind of was until we looked into the name thing more, and now I'm really certain that they're all the same person.
Bentrichet, man. Listen,
Yeah.
I'm sorry you died, Bentrichet. I don't care what Nick said.
I mean, if Bentrichet didn't die, then we wouldn't have Dorothy Bentrichet. or I guess a better way to say it, if Bentrichet hadn't died, we wouldn't have a story about Seti.
That is true. So. Well, the next part, Nick, kind of dives into kind of towards the end of her life. And then we've got another closing segment after that. But do you want to know what happens further in her life?
Is it good or bad?
It's very eye-opening.
Okay, yeah, I definitely want to know that then.
Check this out.
In 1964, Omm Sety, entrenched in Abydos, faced retirement, but her spirit, steeped in the antiquity of the place, defied detachment. Recognizing her profound bond, the Antiquities Department allowed her to remain, an acknowledgement of her as a living fragment of Egypt's vast history. Her days, sustained by weaving and the support of the community, mirrored her fusion with the ancient city. In the Temple of Seti, her stories breathed life into the age-old walls, as if rekindling her past existence. After a heart attack in 1972, Omm Seti's life became even more severe, symbolizing her unbreakable bond with the past. She claimed a divine visit from Seti I in her new home, a sanctification that spoke of a bond not bound by time. Her diaries, filled with conversations with Seti I, hinted at a soul's journey across ages. They were not just historical accounts, but the narrative of a soul that had seen civilizations rise and fall. Omm Seti's life was a testament to reincarnation, a bridge spanning millennia, allowing the whispers of an ancient world to echo in the modern age. Her very being blurred the lines between past and present, suggesting a continuity of existence beyond one lifetime.
This hit on something that was said earlier. And now that I've got more of the story, I have something to say on it.
Okay.
So in her dreams, she gets visited from Seti. She's got to be like, you son of a bee. You got some nerve coming around here after all the trouble you caused me.
That's pretty funny. You know what I find interesting about the story, though? So at the beginning of her nightmares and stories, she's visited by Hora.
Right.
Hora breaks down her entire life, and then Seti I starts appearing.
Right.
And what I find it interesting is, and kind of when you go back and read the readings of Omm Sety, she talked about how what impacted her life is that Seti I came to her and explained, this is what happened to our dynasty. This is what I've done. This is how we transition from one life to the next. That's how I'm able to come to you. That's how Hora was able to come to you. This is your life. So it almost gave her validation in her own mind.
Right. Well, she had a lot of validation throughout her life because she was validated by the person from the British Museum, the people from that library, her husband's family, the community. And I think this last one mentioned that her contributions were kind of accepted as fact from even the authorities there. Or did I misinterpret that?
Nope, you was correct on that.
So, everyone she ever met bought into her story.
Correct.
And that's rare.
It's very rare. There's actually a whole lot to this that I didn't cover in the narration because there's a lot to her actual story above and beyond. But there's some things that literally will blow your mind. Now, here's the way, this is how I frame all stories. I look for what's the interesting aspects, right?
Right.
And a lot of times I say, what's the influence of the people during those situations, if that makes sense, right? Her dad did what for a living?
Films.
Film industry, right?
Right.
Would you say he probably made a lot of money? Film industry.
Tough to say. I'd say back then probably not so much.
He made a lot of money. He made a lot of good money.
Well, I guess they were traveling a lot and stuff like that. Okay.
Correct, yeah. She was part of the pristine associations. She gave all that up to go to a country and live in poverty. So that really goes back.
Divorce, I think, would probably be serious. I'm thinking about as well, by the way.
Yeah, she never remarried.
Right.
Never. And the last part of that narration, I don't know if you caught it. It said that for a living, she was working for basically, what do they call those? The people that was digging up.
Archaeologist or?
Archaeologist that was there in Egypt.
Okay.
But to supplement her income, because she wasn't making much money there,
right,
she was sewing on the side.
Right. Did it say like she was weaving on a loom?
I don't know. I know she was sewing.
I might imagine
that
but
it's very possible that she may have. I don't remember that part. I know I added something to the narration about sewing, but I can't remember what form that was.
Okay.
Now, here's what I found interesting and why, if you take everything and you encapsulate it, you go, there must be something to it. I'm about to step it up a little bit for you.
Step it up. All right.
What makes her vastly different than other cases of reincarnation that I found? I've got it in my notes here. Omm Sety had an uncanny familiarity to the Temple of Seti.
Right.
She reportedly knew the entire layout of the temple garden before it was even excavated.
Oh, no, that's something.
Including the location of the garden and a particular tree that wasn't even known at the time of the research.
And they discovered it after.
Here's what happened.
Right.
She's there. She got divorced, and then she started working with these archaeologists. And they just, not to be mean, they thought she was a whack job, a wackadoodle. They thought she was like, yeah, they thought she was just someone that was trying to pretend to be Egyptian, that had this whatever, and they didn't believe her. So she basically kept going there until they was like, fine, we'll let you do X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. One day she's talking to one of the guys and she goes, I can tell you where things are that no one knows. You haven't even found these things yet. And they're like, okay, yeah, go ahead and tell us. What is it? And she goes, there's a garden over there. If you start excavating over there, you're going to find it. And we used to have a tree orchard or like a tree farm over there. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah. They didn't even go and do it because they thought she was a wackadoodle.
Right.
Years go by and they just happen to move over that way and they stumble across the garden exactly where she said it was. And trees that they didn't even know existed in that part of Egypt. And she was able to provide
down
both.
There. And they're like, can you help us some more?
Correct. Another interesting thing, the Temple of Seti. A skeptic comes that there's only 3 people that knows the interior of the temple. Knows it well. Like there's layouts and stuff that you can find similar to the library, like I was talking about. So the skeptic comes to her and he's one of 3. And he's there to disprove her.
Right.
This is before she found anything else. And he goes, well, if you know so much, tell me the layout. She draws the entire layout based on her own memory.
Mm-hmm.
And he looks at it and he goes, that's really cool. You know, you'll find this in a library. What's these 2 things? And she goes, this is something that this led to this and this led to that. And he starts laughing. He goes, those don't exist.
Oh, I know it's coming.
Puts it away, didn't think about it. Years go by. Someone else saw and they go, what is this you have? And he goes, some wackadoodle that's out there telling me these things exist. And they said, well, can you go look and see? Like, have you looked? And he goes, I don't need to. We've already uncovered all of this stuff. The other guy was like, fine, let's go and just double check. They go and they found a false wall.
Wow.
That led to these cavernous areas inside of Seti the First temple. In addition to that, because they go back to her and they're like, how do you know this? And she goes, I told you, this is my land. This used to be mine. And they're like, charlatan, right? You're a witch.
How
like,
could
that's
you
not
say
what this
that
is.
after that part? Oh, did they actually say that? You're a witch?
No, but I mean, it was basically like,
oh, okay.
That's probably what they said. That was me embellishing.
Right.
And they said, if it's true, then what's the hieroglyphics on the wall, which no one had record of back then? And she wrote out all the hieroglyphics that was on the wall.
Wow. So they can't be skeptics at this point then.
They didn't understand how she was doing it. Because back then when she did this, they were still using lanterns inside the pyramids. So she taught them things that they didn't even know existed yet. Man, in addition to that, she was able to identify and describe archaeological sites and artifacts that had been obviously uncovered. Her accurate description of certain locations and details inside the temple were later confirmed by the findings and were particularly notable in future renovations, or not renovations, in future what's it called? Excavations in the future of that temple. They thought they were done with that temple. They had started moving on. They went back to it. Omm Sety displayed a deep understanding of hieroglyphics and ancient Egyptian rituals, not just the hieroglyphics. She changed their concept and idea of some of the rituals. Like, again, this goes back to your guy, like you talked about earlier. I know how this is. This is how this is. He wasn't Egyptian. He has no clue. It's just his assessment. These same people was there and was like, that's what this is. This is how it works. And she goes, it's really not. Like, it's really not. Like, this ritual is what we used for this. Later on, they looked into it and they go, maybe. They've never proven it. But it made them go, that's really weird. She learned to read the hieroglyphics at a young age and often demonstrate insights into the Egyptian religious practices and beliefs that were not common knowledge.
Right.
So
I wouldn't say they're common knowledge today.
We have somewhat of an understanding, but the understanding we have, guess where that came from?
Yeah. Well, when I say
Dorothy
not common
Eady.
knowledge, I mean, if I went outside and knocked on some doors, I bet I couldn't find a person who could tell me anything about any Egyptian rituals.
Correct.
Except maybe for the canoptic jars and what they do with the brains and stuff like that, maybe.
Well, and I found this similar to what you're talking about, though. There was things that she also uncovered that was knowledge, but not published at that point.
Right. And she's had a history of doing that.
Yes. But what was more important was there was certain things that there's like the biggest thing they didn't understand about Egyptians that they learned from her was like a prime example was the food that was ate. It was assumed that they ate certain foods. She was like, no, I ate. And again, she referred to herself in past tense. I used to eat X, Y, and Z. And again, at this point, they're like, let's just check in. Let's not accuse her of anything. Yeah. Let's check in. And they was able to find the things to produce what she was talking about. Right. But obviously there's no way of proving it. but they wouldn't have had some of those things unless
Yeah.
they was producing that type of food.
This isn't isn't relevant to the story, but I'm going to ask you anyway, just in case you know, and I don't expect you to, but that's something I never learned about the ancient Egyptians. What were they eating?
Supposedly the thing that they was confused by, which they didn't really know,
Right.
they ate a lot of fruit.
Okay. Like, did they
And
make dishes, or did they just eat what they had?
they didn't cover that in this, but the number one thing that I know that they were shocked by was the amount of fruit that went through the temples. I would assume based on, and I don't know where this time frame comes in, but like Tutankhamun, a lot of it that they talked about then was they had forms of bread, which I wouldn't have assumed that would have been a thing, but apparently that was even a thing back then, was some forms of, because it's like, how do you mill that stuff back then?
Right. Well, all you need is 2 stones, really. But that's completely irrelevant to the story. That was just something I was like, I don't know this. Maybe Bert will know.
No. I know that fruits they did not assume that there was a lot of fruit. They knew that there obviously had to be fruit.
Yeah.
But they didn't understand the level of how much fruit was going through there.
Okay.
And she was able to basically say, hey, I ate this and I did this and I did that. Another thing that she talked about was some of their clothing that they thought was certain things. And she completely changed the concept of how clothing was there also.
Oh, really? Huh.
Mm-hmm. A lot of stuff that we know about Egypt today started with her. It didn't start that way originally, but she changed their ideas and concepts on a lot of it.
Oh, and they must have independently verified it. So that's amazing.
I would assume so. And the biggest thing is she claimed to have had visions from the spiritual encounters, including conversations with the spirit of Pharaoh Seti I, offering insights and information that she believed were communicated to her from the ancient past. So a lot of ways that they looked at stuff, they completely changed the concept and ideas of why. The thing I wish they would have asked her, which I don't think they would have thought any differently, was if they could have asked her, did you guys build these?
Yeah.
Why did you build them?
Back then, I imagine that's a pretty new concept that
correct. They assumed everything was just built.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think even the concept when people look at it biblically is that the slaves was building the pyramid. Nowhere does it say that.
No.
The slave was slave labor.
Right. Yeah.
But we don't know what they were building.
I'm glad you brought it back to that again, because that's a misconception a lot of people have, that the Bible was saying that the slaves were building the pyramid. So what Dr. Awas said didn't contradict that at all.
Right.
They're basically saying the same. The Bible was leaving out the same thing that he was saying. So there's no contradiction there at all.
Correct. And that's, again, it goes back to context, right? Like if I wrote a book today and I was like, we got this lumber and we started the building process and blah, 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 but I don't explain what I'm building. Was I building a deck? Was I building a shed? Was I building a house?
Right.
Was I building a dance floor? That was the Bible. It said man labor.
You may find this interesting, but yesterday I was talking to my brother, and we got on the topic somehow of how the pyramids were built, and he believes it's like that Egyptians didn't build, and I, of course, believe that they did. So we were arguing about that a bit yesterday. That must have been some kind of foreknowledge of what we were going to be talking about today.
Could be. Graham Hancock also says that they were not built by Egyptians.
So you and my brother are on the same side here on this topic, I guess.
I don't know. I'm interested because Graham Hancock brings a lot of things to the surface that I think makes me lean back and go, that makes sense. And the biggest thing that he says, which makes me scratch my head, is nowhere in the writing. If you read the hieroglyphics, which they've done, it always tells of what they're doing, You would think if they were doing something as important as building pyramids, it would at least be in their writings.
I don't know.
Right? Like, think about it. When we build a building, what do we always put at the foot of the building?
Like the keystone with the information on it. Yeah.
We always do, because I think it's a case where, and again, if you go back to the hieroglyphics, nowhere do they ever say they built anything. And if you look at like the Sphinx, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't believe that was the original head.
I've heard that before.
The head is significantly smaller than the rest of the body. And what they believe is that was the head of a lion. And that it was carved down. In fact, if you look at the cutting marks, according to Graham Hancock, I don't know. This is what he says. But he's been there. I've not. So I'm going to go with Graham Hancock on this one. He says the carving marks and the erosion difference between the head of the Sphinx and the back of the Sphinx is tens of thousands of potential years.
That potentially makes sense.
But he says if it was the head of a lion and you're Egyptian, you're not going to keep that.
Right.
You're going to put a pharaoh on the front, which is why they believe that's what it was.
A lot of people say that there's an entrance in the head of the Sphinx as well, but I've seen what they use as evidence for that. It's that old drawing of it. And people say, oh, it looks like he's coming out of the head. That's just perspective. They're crawling up the back of it. Don't you know how perspective works? Like,
that is true.
But there's a whole thing about that. And I don't know if you've heard this cockamamie thing called the Akashic Records and all that stuff.
Mm-mm.
It's like the library of all the knowledge that ever is, was, or will be of the human race is hidden in this.
I thought that was with Atlantis.
It might be related to that, but it's called the Akashic Records.
I thought all those records was supposed to be in Atlantis when it got flooded.
I'll tell you exactly where those records are. In the imagination of nut jobs. And sorry for the probably 60% of you that believe in this.
Well, and that's the thing. Honestly, if you watch Graham Hancock, when he's talking to, and I forget the name of the other guy, and I feel so horrible. They go back and forth. There's actually on the Joe Rogan podcast. I'm going to find that. And I'm going to send that to you after we're done here.
Okay.
The knowledge that they give. And remember, Graham Hancock's dad's name is chiseled into one of the temples.
Okay.
He was there looking at all that stuff way before. And every time they've tried to bring that guy to do any kind of a debate, he refuses to go.
Yeah.
In fact, they went to the same debate and he saw Graham Hancock, turned around and said, I'm wasting my time, and left.
Oh, really?
Won't even talk at all because it's against his thought process.
That guy shouldn't have chiseled his name into that, by the way.
He should not.
He should not do that.
Graham Hancock's dad.
I think someone got in a lot of trouble for doing a similar defacement just last year.
Oh yeah, you couldn't do it now.
No.
Yeah, you can lose your life for that now if you're caught. You're not even allowed to touch the pyramids.
No.
Yeah, you can't even touch it. You can look at it. Supposedly, according to Graham Hancock, you can pay guards enough money and they'll let you get up and climb on them.
I've watched TikToks recently about that, in fact. And there's a lot of
people
that
lose
pretend to be guards that will take you up to it as well.
Oh, to try to take your money?
Yeah. So I don't know how you'd know who works there and who doesn't. There's so many scammers around the pyramids.
Well, I know that Graham Hancock, he's been a huge part of the past. There was another guy, and I can't remember his name. They was both on the Joe Rogan podcast. Because again, I always went to that guy that you talked about as the main guy. Yeah. I was like, he's the man. He knows everything about this. I don't need to go anywhere else. But then when I listen to Graham Hancock, I'm like, who's this crazy guy? And I listen, I'm like, oh, well, why would you not want to debate the man?
Right.
At least, like, if you're going to prove something wrong, and supposedly he's sitting on information that he doesn't want out. And Graham Hancock's, he's wrote a few books on it now.
Actually, I know that to be true. That's pretty well-known knowledge. That is a fact that they do sit on information that they find there for significant amounts of time before they release it.
Which is insane to me. Just let it out.
But that's for like a lot of things, like governments do that around UFOs and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, for sure.
Knowledge should be free out there all the time, but that's just me.
Should be.
Anarchist side.
Nick's like, he's all on the anarchy. Nothing wrong with it. Like I say, there's something to all of the freaking stuff. The fact that she's able to know this stuff, that she's changed the impacts of all these things. Like, it's one thing to learn a lot of stuff as a kid and apply it, but to change experts' ideas and concepts around what you do, no one's doing that unless you got firsthand knowledge, in my opinion.
Yeah, and what a brilliant scam that she thought up when she was 2 to 3 years old to hurl herself off a staircase, and then all of a sudden she said, "Okay, well, I'm gonna stop my heart. I'm gonna start my heart, and as soon as I come back, I'm gonna dedicate the next 70 years of my life to Egyptology."
It's crazy.
Like, that's a brilliant kid.
It's super crazy, and it makes you really question, like, what's going on that we don't understand and we don't know.
Right.
Where does this fit in with everything?
There's this thing I heard that I don't believe, but I think it's a very interesting thought.
About the moon. It's really not real.
No, that moon is real, darn it. It's about this guy who dies. And he's talking to God, although it doesn't claim to be God or whatever. And he says, the guy's like, "Oh, okay, so where do I go now? Heaven or hell?" And he's like, "No, you're going back." And the guy's like, "Going back again?" And God says, "Yeah, you can't stop going back until you've learned all there is you need to know." And the guy's like, "Well, how am I going to know if I don't remember it?" And he's like, "Well, when you go back, you could go back to any time and be any person. So the person you flip off in traffic, you're the guy flipping them off. And in another life, you're being the guy being flipped off. You're going to experience everything from every angle. You're every person you've ever been mad at. You're every person you've ever loved. Everything like that. And when you've learned everything there is to know about people, that's when you stop."
You know what that sounds like?
Interesting. What?
Interdimensionalism.
Yeah, it could be.
That's what it reminds me of. And the reason I say that is, and I forget why I was having this conversation with someone the other day. I can't even remember who I was having a conversation with. It goes back to, there was a story that came out of a Civil War era. I did it for my podcast. I can't remember which one it was, but anyway. We talk about residual hauntings, intelligent hauntings, blah, blah, blah. We try to factor in what all those are. There was a case where this couple who owned the property hears this battle going on. They go outside because they thought a reenactment was occurring, but it was on their property. And they're like, "You can't do that. You don't have." Yeah. They go out and they see nothing. And while they're standing there, he looks and he sees this horse coming. And he says, as the horse gets closer, he sees a man on the back of the horse. And the man is in Civil War. He's a Union soldier and he's got a sword up. And he's staring at him as he passes, just like staring at him intently. And I sit back and I think, what if in that dimension, that guy's looking at the guy that owned our property in our dimension like he's a ghost?
Right. There's a movie,
and it's those two dimensions. Too. Oh, there is?
Yeah. I can't really say too much without giving it all away, but there's people in it. I'm going to do it anyway. So if you don't want to hear it, close your ear holes.
Close your ears.
I think it's called Haunter. And it's this family that is living in this house and they have unexplained things going on and they don't know what it is. And it seems like a haunting, but they come to find out they're seeing the people who currently live in the house, and they were all ghosts that were stuck there.
Oh, man. That kind of reminds me of the movie The Others. With who? Michelle Pfeiffer? Is that who it was? Who was it?
I don't know. I know the movie you're talking about.
Yeah, the two kids and the mother, and they're living in the house, and all of a sudden it starts getting haunted, and kind of find out they were the ones that was dead. They were the ghost. We just ruined two movies simultaneously. That's impressive.
Well, here's another one, but anyone who hasn't seen it just doesn't watch TV. Sixth Sense. That's the whole premise of that.
Yeah, correct. Like, it's interesting. It makes you think. I saw that in
the theater, and that blew my mind.
Nick's like, I didn't see that coming.
I totally didn't.
I didn't either. If we're being a buck, I didn't know until the very end. I don't know. It makes you look at stuff like that and you go, what if this is all interdimensional stuff? And it explains it. We tie everything together. This ties in with freaking Skinwalker Ranch. It ties in with everything else. And what if this is all interdimensional things?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one thing. It just enhances and backs up my belief. Like, my whole belief system is, what the F is going on? What the F is going on every day? I got no explanations for anything. A bunch of crazy crap happens. And what the hell is going on?
Correct.
All I know about reality is I don't know what's going on.
Correct. It's definitely a weird concept and idea. And it's not one that I don't know that we'll be able to answer on this side. Is like I told someone today, I want to so badly start ghost hunting to try to understand that part, in which I never will, right? I think everyone that goes into it, the problem is I think a lot of people go into it with the intent of doing good things, but then they go, oh, wait, I get paid more if I fake this or I do this or I do that. And then it's thrown right out the window. Yeah. It's more about making money than it is being true to yourself.
Credibility of everything. You know what's going to happen? 3,000 years from now, a kid's going to fall down the space stairs and they're going to wake up and they're going to be like, I was just doing a podcast about ancient Egyptians, whatever those are.
I don't even know what that is. It's crazy.
My name's Nick now, by the way.
Well, do you want to tie this one up, Nick? We got one more segment left that kind of ties it into a sweet little bow.
Yeah. And then I'll give my verdict, but I think you already know what it is.
I think we might know this one, Nick.
As the sun dips below the horizon of Abydos, casting the desert in a cloak of twilight, the essence of Omm Sety seems to linger in the cooling sands. Her life, an intricate tapestry of the present and a past long faded into legend, continues to bewitch the hearts of those who wander among the ruins she once called home. In the quiet of the coming night, where the stars hang like jewels above the enduring monuments of pharaohs, one can almost hear the faint echo of her footsteps, a soft murmur of ancient chants carried by the wind. Omm Sety, the woman who lived between two worlds, left behind a legacy that defies the boundaries of time, a narrative that stretches the very fabric of history, questioning the finality of death, and the possibility of a soul's journey beyond a single lifetime. Her story does not conclude with the final breath she took in 1981, but rather it persists in the collective consciousness of those who continue to seek the mysteries of existence. The depth of her knowledge, the passion of her beliefs, and the enduring mystery of her experiences in Abydos remain as a testament to a life that may have danced along the delicate edge of two realities, intertwined by the timeless thread of reincarnation. Whether Omm Sety was the reincarnation of an ancient priestess or the embodiment of the most profound affinity for a civilization long gone, her story compels us to ponder the unexplained connections that some souls may have with the past. In the silence of the temple, among the whispers of the ancients, her tale invites us to explore the possibility of an immortal thread in the human spirit, a thread that defies the erosion of epochs, binding us to the core of humanity's enduring saga. And so, beneath the watchful gaze of eternity, the story of Dorothy Eady Omm Sety ends. But the questions she raised remain, echoing in the chambers of the heart and mind, as ceaseless as the Nile's flow. Her presence in Abydos, now a whisper in the winds of time, continues to inspire those who look upon the relics of history not just as relics of stone and sand, but as beacons of the soul's uncharted journey through the corridors of time.
That was cinematic. Like that,
That's the whole point, Nick.
Chills. Wow. So she died the year that I was born.
Yes.
So I think I'm now Omm Sety.
You're now Omm Sety, Nick.
But a man.
This explains so much. We're talking about you now.
That's why this is giving me chills, is because it's me.
It's you this whole time, Nick. I just told you your whole lineage. You don't even have to go to horror now.
Now I can answer this for you, so you don't have to wonder. It's all true.
It's all true. Every single.
I can tell you because it was me. No, I'm just kidding. I got to thank you. This is probably the best tale I've ever heard.
It's a good tale.
Boy, I'm sure it's no mystery right now, but I'm going to say it in a very particular way. If all the information that we got tonight was true, I am 140 million% sure that something is going on here.
That's why I like this story, because I've never been able to disprove. Like, before I started doing research, and I've been doing research on this for like 30 days.
Right.
I knew that there was this crazy lady in Egypt that was teaching people things that she shouldn't know because she said she was a Egyptian priestess, basically.
Right.
And that's all I knew of the story. When I started researching, I go, oh, there's a lot to this. And like, I didn't know that this all happened when she fell down a stairway as a kid. I had no clue any of that. So
right.
Once I got to it, at first I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely going to do the story. But then when I started from the beginning, I'm like, how this is not a movie blows my mind.
Oh, this should be.
And technically, if you think of The Mummy, what was it? The Mummy 2?
Right.
When that woman was trying to take over the body of the other woman. That could be like a
Nuxinamun.
Kind of a way of the what?
I love those movies so much. I know their names. The lady trying to take over the body was named Nuxinamun.
There you go. Maybe that's where they came up with that idea.
Oh, maybe. That's such a wild story. Such a wild story.
And the crazy part is I've left a ton out. We hit the major stuff, but I left a ton of stuff out.
Like if she died in 81, there's got to be recordings of her.
Oh, there's tons of photos.
Yeah, I gotta
there is. There is. What's interesting is when you look at her, she's not how you would picture a white woman from Egypt or from the UK. That's really? That's not. Yeah, it's not at all.
Does she kind of look?
She doesn't look Egyptian.
Oh, okay.
Because of the clothes she wore and everything else, you would almost be like, this is someone that was white but was raised in Egypt. And a lot of times when she was there, she did all the original customs, which most Egyptians don't even do to this day.
Wow.
So like she walked everywhere barefoot. When she would go into the temple, she would do like all these different, what do they call that? Almost like ways of honoring it before she'd walk into the temples.
Right, right.
She would do the prayers till the day she died. And what was amazing, and I think we covered it in the narration, she was supposed to retire at 61 or whatever. They left her on to continue doing it for like another 10 years.
Oh, really?
Because of her knowledge.
She didn't live that long, actually, now that I'm looking at it. She died quite young, I think.
Yeah. Well, we're talking the 80s. No, she lived until what, 81?
Yeah, 81. And the story starts in 1930.
Well, it was 1930s when this stuff was happening. When was she born? We'll find out exactly when she was born here, folks. She was born in... As soon as ChatGPT decides to let me know, it's thinking really hard about this one, which kind of scares me.
If she was born in 1930.
Oh,
51.
No, she wasn't.
Okay.
January 16th of 1904. So I was way off.
Oh, hold on. There's something wacky here then. Okay.
Well, when was World War One?
Embarrassed I don't know that. Maybe I misheard the year, because I thought it said 1930.
Well, no, I said I thought a series of these happened in 1930s.
Okay.
But I could be the one that's wrong on that. World War One actually lasted from July 28th of 1914 to November 11th of 1918. And she was, if you think about it, it said she was a teenager when the bombing started happening and they moved to Sussex. So that's probably correct.
Okay, so she did live quite long then in that case.
Yeah, she lived a long time, yeah.
Yeah.
So she was born in 1904 to 1981.
Yeah. So that was quite some time.
Yeah.
That's better. Okay, that makes sense.
So she moved to Egypt when she was 27, which would have made it 1931 is when she would have moved to Egypt. So we was off on the timelines. I was off on timelines.
If you're really into math and you've listened this far into the podcast, this part's for you.
Yeah, exactly. I was more concerned with the story.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean...
For sure.
I might have misheard that anyway. But
I definitely said the 1930s because that's what I was thinking was the 1930s is when this was all happening, which I guess in 1930s is when she moved to Egypt and everything kind of happened. So I guess I was partially right on that. I knew it was the 1930s and 1940s for part of it.
So that would be getting into World War II in that case.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. I'm on board for this. You know, I'm the believer in this case. I guess you're a believer too. So just call us two believers.
And I can't explain it. I mean, I can't explain what happened. Like it doesn't make sense to me why she's able to have this knowledge and so precisely. Like none of that makes sense.
I can't believe you're willing to get exiled over this. I can hear the Pope knocking on your door right now. I hear his little hat bopping on the door frame right now.
I'm just glad it's the Pope and no one else. Don't want any of those freaking door-to-door salesmen.
Yeah, the Electrolux guy again.
Oh, man. He pops up in every podcast now, Nick.
Yeah, that's right. He's an owl. Nah, back on topic. Thank you for telling this story. This was spectacular. This is one of the best stories I've heard. Plenty of details. And I really can't poke a hole in it. If everything
I can't.
You've said is true, then this is like ironclad, in my opinion.
Yeah, everything here, as far as the story, is what has happened point blank. The only thing I wish I would have done in the narrations would have added the years, but that wasn't as important to me in the story narrative as the story itself. I would have forgotten
it by the time we got to this point anyway. I just happened to write down like a couple, too. So
yeah. It's definitely a fun story, though, in my eyes. Now, other cases of reincarnation, quote unquote, potential, I can poke holes in some of those. This one is one that I've never been able to.
It's too much.
It's different. It's different when she knows things she shouldn't know.
Right.
For me.
Well, that's how you prove that kind of thing. Like no one could have known about that false wall.
No.
I mean, I don't think they just let people go skipping in there.
No.
Like,
no. Even back then.
Right. So I'm in.
Yeah, but for anyone that's interested in stories,
selling.
that one's a fun one. Exactly.
Yeah.
And but here's the crazy part. Could that part of the story be folklore? Like, that's the only thing we don't know. And that's what some skeptics say, just to play devil's advocate a little bit. What some skeptics say is that the information that she received was from all those libraries when she was a kid, and that the false walls and the hieroglyphics on the inside was just folklore. There was no basis in truth. There's no, like, that's not in journals or evidence. It's just simply been told down through generations.
Yeah, like anecdotal.
In fact, that's one of the stories she told. Yeah. So their theory is, it's only as good as what Dorothy Eady had stated, as well as other people.
Yeah, that's kind of why I had to frame it like, as long as everything we heard is fact.
True. Yeah, 100%.
Then I'm 100,000,000% in. But
part of the problem is, part of the problem is we don't know that. Now, it was given as the gospel in research. That's one of the things that they talk about. Now, one of the things that they definitely have proven is that the garden and the trees, 100%, that's on the record as her helping them find that.
Yeah, and that goes a long way for me. Because I don't think that's commonly known even today by the average person.
To find trees that didn't exist that's not something that someone would know. Now, the rest of it, who knows? I know that one's on the record because that one was wrote somewhere, because they had basically where she had it, there was actually a written section that she had wrote. So that one was definitely there. But the skeptics still go back to just dumb luck, because what they're saying is most of those areas have things within the proximity. She just happened to guess the correct proximity.
I don't know about that. But there's one great thing about being a human being and with an imperfect brain. I could believe this if I want to, and I'm going to.
It goes back to, again, even if I didn't hear anything else, I would say, why would someone who had money in a family leave luxury and live the life of poverty unless there's something to it?
Yeah. I mean, that's not evidence enough for me, but that's a piece of evidence.
For sure.
Well,
obviously, if the rest of you, Nick's like, listen, we're just piecing it all together. This is all substantial information.
Yeah.
And if the rest of you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments. Tell us what your favorite part was. Tell us if there's something we left out. Is there something that we didn't know that you find interesting? Also, is there other cases of reincarnation that you don't know anything about? Or that we don't know anything about that you want us to talk about? That's what I would like to know. What other cases are similar to this that you think might be better than Omm Sety? I doubt you'll find one.
Very unlikely. Challenge given.
Also, wherever you're listening to us, please be sure to rate us and let us know that we're doing a good job. Tell your friends about us too.
Yeah, share us everywhere. Make us famous.
Make us famous, is right. But until we see you on the next stream, goodbye.
Bye-bye.